Well, welcome and welcome to Drew Matthews. Really pleased to have you here, Drew. A real pleasure for me. I hope it's going to be a pleasure for you. We're going to do 20 questions for reward professionals. And I'm not going to talk a lot about your background, apart from the fact that you are 25 years into your career, which is pretty impressive. You're currently Group Head of Reward, Benefits and Wellbeing at Centrica.
That's
And
right.
you've worked on both sides of the table for big companies like BT, BAE Systems, Tesco, but you've also worked as a consultant for some of the major consulting companies like Aon, PwC, KPMG, and Arthur Andersen back in the day. So you've got a very interesting career behind you and a career ahead of you. And I really wanted to start in terms of, well, what got you involved in reward in the first place?
Well, that's an easy one. I fell into it. I didn't set out for a career in reward. In fact, I don't think I knew what a reward career was. I started a US management consultancy over sort of 26 years ago, specializing in performance measurement and linking it to business strategy and finance, and then linking it to incentives. And then from there, I sort of thought, oh, there's a whole world of reward and incentives. Became a sort of remuneration committee advisor, went through a number of consultancies. My career really went from there. At one point, I suddenly thought there's more to this than executive pay, and took my first corporate job, and off I went, and I've done various jobs since then.
Well, it sounds like you've just covered a lot of ground very quickly. So let's also think of a little bit about how your own views of reward have evolved over that journey. You know, what sort of things look different to you now based on your experience, and what kind of looks the same compared to the Drew that started off in reward?
That's a really good question. What's different for me now, and it might be age related, and the fact that I'm a family man now. So I've got three young children, but as I've gone through different experiences and been successful at doing some things and unsuccessful in some areas and learning from that, I think what's really different for me is seeing how reward can impact on corporate culture and transformation, and the wider impact you can have on employees beyond just two executives. So when I started as a consultant and mainly a remuneration committee advisor, my focus was on literally the CEO and CFO, and a disproportionate amount of time was spent on that. And over time, as companies have become more purposeful, we're looking at some of the societal issues. Reward has broadened out into lots of other areas within an organisation, and I find that really exciting. I find that quite energising, actually.
Well,
Um,
that's also very interesting because you started off with that quite elevated focus, which is quite specialised, and now dealing with much wider populations. And it really brings me nicely to my next question, which is: do you find working in reward meaningful?
yes, yeah, I do. So my what gets me out of bed is I say to my team, I care about two things: improving performance and changing people's lives for the better. And that sounds grandiose, but at the age of 53 with three young children, that's how I feel I'm making a real difference. And I think reward can do that. Um, it's the it's the glue, it's the oil that keeps the talent cogs going. You can't get it wrong, and that's really important.
That's a lovely expression. But I'm also curious, now in your role currently with Centrica, I mean, what kind of challenges do you face in that role?
Well, it's a really interesting time to be in the energy business, as you can imagine, with everything that's going on in the world, both from energy security for the nation, making sure we've got reliable sources of energy to warm people's homes and offices, um, but also looking at the difference of transitioning from where we are as a business to net zero, and all the opportunities that comes with green energy, and looking for the talent in that space and what the growth opportunities are. We're also a business that has had some difficult times. We're heavily regulated. There's not huge margins, believe it or not, in a good chunk of our business. So what have we had to fix in that space and get ready and fit for the future? So it's really exciting.
And I'm curious, sort of specifically in the role that you have with reward, what sort of opportunities do you have personally to make a difference in that environment?
Um, Well, I suppose being a sort of reward director, I have another hat, which is I'm an HR director and I sit on the HR leadership team for the organization. So you have a broader leadership responsibility on all aspects of people. But on the reward side, it comes back to the two things that get me out of bed, which is how can I help the organization improve performance? How can I help teams and individuals improve their performance? And ultimately, how do I change their lives for the better? So we're people, we've got 20,000 people. Some of them will be struggling with the cost of living. Lots of people will be struggling with the cost of living. So what can we do to help that and allow them to focus what they should be, which is focusing on servicing customers and not worrying about how they're gonna, buy food.
Yeah, really interesting. I've got a question coming up for you about that in a moment. But before we get to that one, I kind of also, your career has really been in lots of ways defined by reward. Would you say that's probably true, that it really has sort of shaped the career path that you've taken?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I fell into it and then really became a sort of career sort of Remco advisor and consultant. And then I suddenly realised that I was getting a bit fed up with having that conversation about two people, and about the CEO and CFO pay, and I couldn't have another conversation about whether TSR was a good measure or a bad measure. I was just bored with that conversation. So I really wanted to get into a space where I could make a difference. And when you've got thousands of people, when I was at Tesco, at that point we had 500,000 people in a variety of businesses, 300,000 in the UK, 200,000 overseas. That's quite exciting and a privilege to work in that space. So reward is I get a real buzz out of, and over time I've expanded my portfolio. I look after employee relations. I've looked after health, safety, and well-being. And there I'm just learning stuff every day. When no one goes through a COVID crisis expecting to, no one's trained to do COVID. And you have to do the best you can and go with your values and trying to do the right thing by people in the organization. So I love it. It's a great job.
And now that you've kind of gained all that experience, I mean, how would you sort of define the scope of reward? Having come from the focus on the two people to the focus on the many, where would you say the boundaries are? Or are there any boundaries for reward, do you think?
uh, I think it's blurring. It's increasingly blurred. If you look at one of the sort of challenges or the trends, if you like, about fairness and perceived fairness in reward and society, I think reward boundaries are blurring and becoming broader. So increasingly, you're looking at broader HR policies beyond benefits, parental leave, working patterns, etc. These are all very important things to people. So I think over time, it's become more than just salary incentives and shares and pension, and that's good because it allows you to join the dots. It helps you to join the dots for people. There are many reasons why people come to work. Pay is important, but it's not the only reason.
Yeah, but I'd like to next take a little look at the reward proposition itself, sort of get your views on that. And the place I'd like to start really is, in your experience, which aspect of reward is the most important for top talent? If you look just at the top talent segment, what do you think is the most important part of reward for those people?
I would capture it in rather than the actual aspect of remuneration. The key aspects are recognition and progression, and therefore there are reward aspects to that. So top talent, first of all, you recognize that they are top talent. That's important, and therefore how you pay them is a function of that. Um, and you take deliberate actions to move them up and through the organisation into new opportunities, and with that comes change in pay and rations. With that, so they go hand in hand in terms of base pay progression, incentive payouts, and incentive opportunities. But it's really important that that top talent can see that they're making progress in day to day work and given new opportunities.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense to me. But what about, what I call the mighty middle? Would that work? That wouldn't really work for people who don't make so much progress or movement. But in lots of ways, the mighty middle is what gets the company to where it needs to be, not just the people who are moving quickly. What do you think would be important for those core contributors in the mighty middle compared to the top talent people?
Yeah, I think that get the basics right, in terms of the competitiveness of their overall package, the perceived fairness and relativity with others. And actually, over the years, I've probably learned that internal relativity is probably has a bigger impact than external relativity. We always talk about competitive market positioning, but actually, the real motivator for our people is that internal relativity, I think. So getting that fair is really important.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it, I think, because I agree with you. That's certainly my own feeling is that, things that are closer to you hurt you more, whereas external competitivity isn't such a big deal. But if you feel that things aren't fair close to you, that's not so
Yeah.
enjoyable. Drew, now, if there was one thing that you could change in the reward proposition, and specifically at Centrica maybe, but you can be more general. If there was one thing you could change in the reward proposition, what would it be?
Or I would like to see a bit more focus and support around what I would call saving for the future. So we're an organisation that has recently closed its defined benefit quite late compared to other companies, and we've got another tier of people in defined contribution. So we're at that late stage compared to some other companies. We do lots of good stuff and provide lots of different opportunities to save, but I think coordinating the education, the financial awareness, and encouraging people to save for the future, whether that's for retirement or whether that's to pay off debts or get on the housing ladder. I think we could do some more in that space. And generally, the narrative around what we do, the total reward narrative, just making it a bit easier for people to navigate and work out what they do get and how to use it.
Okay, that's really good. And what do you think employers are getting right in reward at the moment? Generally speaking, what do you think we've got right in reward?
Well, I think reward directors, companies, and their boards have changed their mindset from the focus on two people. There is a real sort of drive to purposeful organisations. Some doing it more than others. But I generally think their response to both COVID, pandemic, and the cost of living crisis that we find ourselves in, I think generally companies are trying to do the right thing by people. Um, and whether it's the protecting jobs and the furlough that the government provided through to profit sharing and all of that good stuff that companies are doing, or special payments or higher salary increases. So I think generally there is a real focus on the welfare, well-being of the workforce more than there's been for, well, say 26 years ago or whenever I started. I think there was a little bit more two-tier.
Okay. And I'm also curious, beyond what you mentioned about financial well-being and saving for the future, is there anything else that you think employers are generally kind of getting wrong about reward? Is there something that we should be paying attention to more there?
We overcomplicate stuff. Reward and HR, I think I've spent the last 10 years of my life de-junking HR, actually, because sometimes HR gets in the way. Um, you really have to hone in on what matters to people, and to know that you have to ask them what matters to them, and you can have a reasonable stab at working that out. But get the basics of think Maslow's hierarchy. Sometimes basic need, and if you get that right, then the other stuff is a bonus and is helpful. But sometimes we overcomplicate stuff.
Yeah, overcomplication is our enemy, I think. I agree with you on that one. I want to change direction a little bit now because the next section, we're really going to talk a little bit more about your own reward. We're not going to ask you to divulge it to us, But I am very curious to see, what is it that you value most in your own package? For you personally, what do you value the most?
Well, I'll go back to Maslow's. The base salary has got to be right, fair, and competitive. That's what I run my household on. And I'm kind of one of the people that sort of live within my means in that sense, and everything else on top is literally a bonus. But my package comprises of a salary, a cash annual bonus, long-term shares, car allowances, pension, and then I choose benefits from our flexible platform, which are important to me. So again, young families still, so looking after me and my loved ones is very important. So I'll over-index on extra life cover, critical illness, health screening, dental cover for me and my family. They're the things that are important to me right now. Um, but yeah, we provide that choice and allow people to suit it to their circumstances really. But base salary, and then my sort of hope value, if you like, is long-term shares. And that's I do believe in share ownership, not just at the top and at leadership positions, but throughout the organisation. I think it's a very positive thing for organisations.
Yeah. And if you could sort of step out of the constraints of your own package right now, and you could bespoke it, in whatever way you personally wanted, what would you do differently? What would your bespoke package look like?
Uh, in a slightly blue sky thinking, I'd have a really big salary and then compulsorily make me buy shares monthly, and that's it.
That
And
sounds nice and simple as well, and not too complicated.
yeah, it's very so it might do me out of a job, but actually that would create the alignment. It's simple. Do I think incentives can be incredibly powerful? We know that that's our bread and butter if you get them right. But sometimes, is it going to change my behaviours or am I going to do anything different? I'm not sure. Uh, I think generally, you know, all organisations, I think people come in to do a good job and try to do a good job. It's where my focus should be is the key thing, really.
And I'm also curious, is the way that you kind of value your own reward changed over the course of time? Over the course of your career, you've come to this view, but, is that changed or has it been pretty much the same kind of view?
Uh, yeah, I think early days I was in a hurry to earn more. I was climbing the greasy pole, and that was a sign of success and progress. Um, Now I'm pretty comfortable and more secure in my financial position. I look at it slightly differently. So I'm 53 now, so I'm at the stage of life where I'm sort of nesting and putting stuff away, and that gives me security for the future to allow me to make choices. I'm fortunate and lucky enough that I can do what I want, and that's a really nice position. But certainly earlier, I was certainly craving more, definitely.
Hmm. Interesting. I want you to, Drew, now get your crystal ball out and look into the future a little bit. And I thought one way of starting that would be to sort of say, okay, well, if you look at the future of reward, could you pick maybe three themes that you think will really shape the future of reward, and what would those three themes be?
Yeah, so in the immediate or near term, I think the current focus or the trend on fairness and perceived fairness that will continue. I think you've got obviously cost of living crisis still, EU transparency directive, diversity and inclusion challenges, and social and political unrest in lots of parts of the world, and with even the trade union movements, etc., that we see at the moment. So I think perceived fairness is a trend that will continue. I think we will, as a function, I think we're going to start to have to be more agile and flexible in our approach. I do wonder if annual processes that we hold so dear, or annual systems, like pay bands and annual salary reviews, I don't know how long they've got left in them. Actually, I think we're going to have to be more flexible through the year and be more agile. Recognition will be increasingly important. Companies are already doing that. Spot awards, rewarding behaviours, team achievements, and being more timely in that sort of feedback. If I look more further out, and this is crystal ball gazing, Peter, I would say I think we're going to see some corporate governance arbitrage across countries. I think the UK was a country that really was a leading light on corporate governance, but I think we've now over-indexed and we've got too punitive. And with companies starting to think about moving abroad, US versus UK comparisons, I think there will be some arbitrage in that. And the political outturn of that is likely to be changes in our own codes and best practices, which in turn will impact executive pay. So I think we'll see some arbitrage. Even further out, and this is really a sort of guess, I wonder if we'll see the emergence of a new form of paternalism. What do I mean by that? I think employees are increasingly looking to companies to fill the gaps where the state or government are letting them down. And therefore the benefits and policies that we provide might broaden to fill in those gaps. We might see a demand for employees and their families to have better access to education, more affordable and safer housing, access to medical and caring and welfare. So the things that really do matter where the state can't provide or isn't providing, I wonder whether we'll end up going into a different form of paternalism. So in my head, I've got a new form of the Bourneville village that Cadbury set up. I could see that emerging in pockets of the world where you're trying to attract talent and skills that you might actually just provide housing and education. And now that's a real punt.
Oh, it's really fascinating, though. To deal with that vision of the future, how do you think reward team members' skills, their role and skills, how do you think that may evolve over time?
Yeah, I think reward people historically have always been badged as sort of fairly binary, black, white, technical experts, and increasingly it's grey and blurred lines. So it is a highly technical, specialised skill, but you need to be comfortable with the grey. You need to be comfortable with the emotional intelligence of reward and what motivates people and what's important to them, and that's a certain type of skill. The other thing in this commercial world and agile world, you've got to be curious about how your business makes money and where it's going to be making money. So if you're sat in your ivory tower in the center of excellence or center of expertise and you're just drafting policies and guidelines, I think that those days are rapidly disappearing. You've got to understand where the new markets are and that you might have to do something different and one size might not fit all.
And in that process, Drew, how would you like to engage with employees, to bring that vision of reward to life?
Well, certainly at Centrica, again, 4 months in, I don't know if we know what they value or care about. And that's not to say we don't do engagement surveys, etc., but actually what would be important to them, what would make the difference. And I think that's the stage where I'm trying to work out whether we do know it or don't know it. And I would certainly like to start there as a first pass. And then, as I say, we need to spend a bit more effort or put a bit more effort in explaining what we do provide, because we do lots of good stuff at Centrica. It's all out there. It's all in different parts of the website. How do we make it easier for people to access, understand, make decisions about?
Well, thank you, Drew. I found that really fascinating. I've got two questions left for you, and they're a little bit different, these last two. The first one, well, they're very similar, but the first one really said, and you'll guess what the second one is. The first one really says, well, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received about reward?
Ooh, that's a really good, the best piece of advice.
And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to land the second question because you may want to play between the two. What's the best piece of advice you've ever given to others about reward?
Yeah, so on the first, I always think about a lady, Carol, on the checkout at Tesco, and my local Tesco up the road, just up the thing. When I worked there, I used to go in, and she gave me feedback every day on what I was doing right or wrong, and it was a brilliant feedback loop. It really was. I just wanted to go in for a pint of milk and get out, but she got me every time. Um, it the best advice she gave me was help me make my life simpler.
Very
So
good. Yeah.
and and this is a lady that had done 30 plus years sitting on a checkout in Tesco. Just help me make my life simpler, and that was that always has stuck with me.
I get the feeling she might have put that in amongst quite a lot of other advice as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Oh yeah, oh yeah. We yes, it was especially at come pay review time or profit share time. It was.
Fantastic.
I knew exactly what she felt.
And the other way around, Drew. I mean, what's the best piece of advice you've given to other people about reward, or would give to other people about reward now?
That again, back to the EQ bit. There's always a reason for something. There's always a trigger for something. So reward is hugely emotive. Um, and I've been in some very strange conversations with some very intelligent, successful, incredibly wealthy people who have been sparked into rage about things that you think are very minor, but you kind of need to pick away at the onion to understand what that trigger is. And quite often in reward, there is a trigger. Once you understand that, you're best placed to come up with solutions or give advice, etc. So try and put yourself in their shoes and understand their perspectives on things. And that includes working with trade union partners. Quite a lot of time they say some really good stuff. And the question is, are you listening? Are you really listening to what they're saying? Or are you just going, no, this is how we do it? So I don't know if that's pearls of wisdom or not, Peter, but that's
Well, the pearls of wisdom for me. I mean, it sounds like incredibly good advice, Drew. And I've got to say, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I knew it would be. And thank you so much for experimenting with us with our 20 questions. I really appreciate it.
thank you
So,
very much.
yeah, a real joy. Lots of good lessons, lots of great ideas. So, thank you very much indeed.
Brilliant. Thanks, Peter.